Hi, welcome back to New Zealand Property Insights. I'm Paul Roberts, and today Debbie isn't available, so you've got me. So today we're opening episode 24 with an in-depth look into major demographic reshaping of our housing market, the workforce, starting with the newly released Deloitte's Global 2026 Gen Z and Millennial Survey. So the survey reveals that New Zealanders under 45 are significantly more likely than their international peers to delay major life decisions, such as purchasing a home, starting a family, or making career moves due to financial strain and cost of living pressures. We'll also be unpacking the New Zealand's most common yet misunderstood forms of land ownership in our second segment around cross-lease titles. We'll analyze how cross-leases work, the legal trade-offs, and how to avoid costly defective title traps. And then in our third segment, we will be exposing the truths behind mortgagee sales, loan defaults, and we analyze fresh data from Moody's, Cotality, and Centrix to explain the residential defaults remain near historic lows despite higher interest rates and softer house prices. The episode is to give you a good, clear, strategic view of the current cycle, so let's get into it. So the milestone delay, the Gen Z and Millennial Financial Strain. So we're kicking off this segment with the findings from the 15th annual Deloitte Global 2026 Gen Z and Millennial Survey, which gathered insights from over 22,500 respondents over 44 countries, including 501 young New Zealanders. This report highlights a sustained trend that has been building over the past 3 years, showing that Kiwis born between 1981 and 2012 are feeling intense financial pressure that directly influences their personal and professional choices. So let's look at these facts. 65% of New Zealand Gen Z millennial respondents reported delaying major life decisions due to their financial situation, compared to 50% globally. The cost of living stands out as the single primary concern for young Kiwis, cited by 56% of Gen Z and 46% of millennials. Housing affordability has directly influenced career decisions for 72% of Gen Z and 70% of millennials in New Zealand, compared to 59% and 55% in the United Kingdom. To manage housing costs, deposit barriers, young New Zealanders are actively altering career pathways, including relocating to regional areas or staying in the family home longer to save more money. Deloitte's note that the significant strain took off along the inflation uptick 3 years ago, leaving many young workers living paycheck to paycheck. At the top end of Gen Z is now reaching 31 years old, and struggle to accumulate savings, raising concerns about home ownership. This remains an achievable goal under normal traditional models. On technology adoption, the survey reveals that New Zealand businesses and young workers lag behind Australia and the United Kingdom in adopting artificial intelligence tools in the workplace. Emerging workplace sentiment indicates some Gen Z workers were also pushing back against AI reliance, expressing a strong desire to learn foundational jobs directly and raising concerns around the environmental sustainability and water usage of such tech infrastructure. So from this research from Deloitte, this confirms what we're seeing on the ground, and we have done for some time, that 65% of Kiwis under 45 putting major life decisions on pause, compared to 50% globally. It's quite a big indicator factor of economic pressure. When housing affordability dictates career moves more than 70% of Gen Z and millennials, it completely changes how our cities and regional economies function. People are moving to the regions or staying with parents, not just as a preference, but as a deliberate wealth preservation strategy. When young people are living paycheck to paycheck, saving deposit for a home can feel unattainable if they try to do it blindly. But what concerns us is when people fall into this analysis paralysis and give up on home ownership altogether. Renting indefinitely without a structured retirement plan leaves you highly vulnerable to future rent increases when you reach that retirement age of 65. So I think it is a vital point that the observation about AI adoption and skill development is also quite interesting. Young workers wanting to learn core skills rather than relying entirely on digital shortcuts shows a practical mindset that will serve them better in their careers and financial planning. Financial security is built on fundamental skills and disciplined planning. Whether you're 31 or 45, you don't need to feel trapped by these cost of living statistics. By setting strict buying boundaries, looking at stepping stone properties or regional markets, even looking to invest in regional markets if you can't afford the area that you live in, and working with independent financial advisors to optimize your cash flow, you can take control of your financial timeline and build real wealth regardless of the economic headwinds. And I think a lot of people that go 20%, it's a huge amount of money. You need to have a good mortgage broker because you can do deposits of less than 20%. So there's so many options out there. But if you're not talking to an experienced mortgage broker or financial advisor, you go day to day. So even if you haven't got the funds for the deposit right now, if you're talking to somebody and you understand the hurdles that you need to get through, I'm sure you'll find that there is an easier way, or a way that you can do a lower deposit with a particular bank at a certain time to get you into the market. So it's definitely worth having those conversations. So segment 2, cross-lease complexity, title realities, and shared driveway dynamics, the 999-year compromise. So we're demystifying the New Zealand's common yet frequently misunderstood forms of property ownership, cross-lease title. Now let's just clarify, cross-lease is a property that has one parcel of land with multiple 2, 3, 4, 5 up properties on there, and you all own a share of the land. This is not a leasehold where you don't own the land. And I personally would never buy anything leasehold because you can't control it. And your wealth creation over time is in the dirt, not in the building. So cross leases were widely created from the 1960s onward as a creative way for landlords to subdivide sections without meeting strict council subdivision rules. Today, thousands of Kiwi homes sit on cross-lease titles, and there's nothing wrong with them, offering an affordable entry point for buyers, but bring in a unique legal and neighbourly trade-offs. So let's have a look at that. New Zealand features 4 primary land titles: freehold, owning all the land and the dwelling outright; leasehold, as I just mentioned, renting the land while owning the building. So that's the one we don't like. Unit title, owning a flat or an apartment in, say, the Auckland CBD, where unit title, cross-lease stratum in freehold, then you own a portion of the land. Stratum in leasehold, you don't own any of the land. And of course, we've got the standard cross-lease, which we're talking about today. So under a cross-lease structure, an owner holds an undivided share of the underlying freehold land alongside a long-term lease. Now, this isn't a lease. You're not paying for the lease on the land. This is what they call the 990-year lease. The reason it was put there in the 1960s is nobody's going to live that long. So it actually just means that it's like, it's 1,000 years. So it is, you share the land. And basically nominal rents, such as 10 cents per year for the specific building or unit, that never changes hands anyway. So cross-lease owners effectively lease their specific dwelling from their neighbors, and so do you, while you simultaneously acting as the lessor for the neighbor's dwelling on the same section. Cross-lease properties are generally more affordable than comparative freehold homes in the same suburb, and typically do not require a formal body corporate structure or monthly levies required by unit titles. So common areas such as shared driveways, having to drive past the front house to get to the back house, section fencing, access paths, and communal gardens share maintenance costs across all of the cross-lease holders on the title. Commercial banks and lenders are generally more comfortable advancing home loans on cross-lease properties, providing the memorandum of lease includes any underlying share of freehold land and the physical structures match the official plans. Memorandums of lease established under historical frameworks can contain strict covenants relating on external house alterations, paint colors, parking spaces, pet ownership, or restrictions on long-term renting and short-term holiday letting, such as Airbnb. Property lawyers emphasize that prospective buyers must conduct through legal checks on specific terms of the memorandum of lease and verify that the physical building footprint perfectly matches the registered plans prior to signing an agreement. And this is obviously why we need our lawyers to check all of these. So cross-lease properties represent a significant portion of entry-level housing in New Zealand, especially in established suburbs across Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. For first home buyers or investors looking for affordability without body corporate fees, cross-lease can be a fantastic stepping stone and get you into a good property. You can get a solid home on a shared section at a lower purchase price than a full freehold section. But as article notes, you have to remember that you're in a legal relationship with your neighbors. A neighbor dynamic is crucial because you own a shared interest in the land and lease your footprint from each other. Major structural changes to the outside of your home, like an extension, for instance, or adding a conservatory or building a carport, require written consent from all cross-lease owners on that title. If a previous owner built a deck or a garage without getting neighbor consent or updating the official flats plan with land information, you may end up with talking to lawyers and what would be called a defective title. Defective titles are a classic trap for inexperienced buyers. If you go to sell or refinance a home with outdated flats plans, and the bank's or buyer's lawyer can hold up the transaction until the title is updated, or more importantly, until you remove the extension. So updating a flats plan can cost a few $1,000s in surveying and legal fees. You've also got a consent from your neighbor, of course. They have to sign that off. So if you have a difficult neighbor, that process can turn into a real headache. That's why you must never skip proper legal due diligence before you sign a contract or go unconditional. Your lawyer must read the exact memorandum of lease to check the restrictive covenants on pets, parking, renting, the physical site layout directly against the registered flats plan. If the title is clean and you understand your lease rules, the cross-lease can be a very smart way for affordable entry into high-value suburbs. And I think there are a lot of companies out there now which are doing a great job of actually making leasehold, cross-lease properties into freehold properties. Now, obviously, everybody has to agree, and it does come with a cost per unit, but that's another way. If you, for instance, had 2 properties on one title, you might be able to make the whole thing freehold between you and your neighbor, share the, if you agree, share the cost, and that will considerably increase the value of that property. So segment 3, mortgagee sales, realities, income guardrails, and bank restructuring power. So here's a question that many people are asking. With house pricing softening, interest rates sitting a little bit higher, why aren't more New Zealanders defaulting on their home loans? Mainstream headlines often imply that falling house prices lead directly to forced sales, but fresh data from Moody's, Cotality, and Centrix shows that residential mortgage default rates are extremely low. Cotality data shows there were 111 mortgagee sales in the second quarter of this year, up from 74 in the previous quarter, but dramatically lower than the 763 mortgagee sales during the period of mid-2009, when, of course, we had the global financial crisis. So credit agencies Moody reports that the New Zealand-wide system of non-performing home loan ratio sits at approximately 0.6%, up from a cyclical low of 0.2%, but remaining exceptionally low by international banking standards. Household debt relative to income has fallen approximately 175% in 2021 down to the mid 160% range now. Centrix data shows residential mortgage arrears at 1.27%, represent the lowest recorded since 2023, with 20,700 accounts recorded as past due. Moody's vice president emphasizes that borrowers' ability to repay a mortgage is driven by employment and stable household income rather than house price fluctuations. Regulatory guardrails introduced over recent years, including loan-to-value ratios, LVRs, restrictions like debt-to-incomes, DTIs, and the triple CFA rules, and strict internal bank serviceability testing have successfully carved out high-risk lending, keeping risky loans just to 1.5% of total bank lending. Industry expert Squirrel's chief executive David Cunningham and Cotality's chief economist Kelvin Davidson knows that commercial banks have a near zero appetite for mortgagee sales, actively working with borrowers through loan extensions, interest-only periods, or temporary repayment pauses. Mortgagee sales currently taking place across New Zealand are primarily concentrated in commercial property where borrowers refuse to engage with lenders, rather than typical residential home owner-occupiers. This data at Moody's completely debunks sensationalist headlines about widespread mortgagee collapses. Seeing 111 mortgagee sales in a quarter might be an increase from the record lows of 2022, but compared to 763 mortgagee sales we saw during the GFC, our residential market is remarkably resilient right now. This makes a crucial distinction. Falling house prices do not cause defaults. Loss of household incomes cause defaults. As long as employment holds up, prioritize paying their mortgage above almost everything else. And we have to give credit to the bank serviceability stress test that was put in place years ago. When people are taking out loans at 3-4%, banks are testing their ability to repay at 7 or 8%. That built in a massive safety buffer to household budgets. As pointed out by David Cunningham and Kelvin Davidson, banks genuinely do not want to pursue mortgagee sales. It's bad publicity, expensive, and a last resort. If an owner gets into a temporary difficulty, banks will work aggressively to restructure that loan through the term extensions or interest-only periods, or sometimes even give you a bit of a break while things sort out. A small handful of mortgagee sales occurring right now are almost exclusively stalled property developments where the builder or the developer has over-leveraged and stopped communicating with their lender. For everyday homeowners, as long as you keep your lines of communication open with your bank or your mortgage advisor, there is always solutions available. Never put your head in the sand if your financial situation changes. If interest rates or living costs create cash flow pressure, reach out to your advisor immediately and talk to your bank directly. By restructuring your debt early, stress testing your budget, and maintaining realistic buying parameters, you can navigate fluctuating interest rate cycles safely and protect your income and your home over the long haul. So that wraps up episode 24 of the Property Insights. We've analyzed a Deloitte survey on Gen Z and millennials, the financial strain impacting milestone decisions, the legal realities of cross-lease titles, and the underlying resilience of the mortgage market against default risks. So if you're looking at these demographic shifts and title frameworks and interest rate cycles has made you realize that you need a personalized financial plan, or you want to understand how to build your own buying rules and your own property portfolio in a changing market, our team is ready to assist. If you want to join us at our completely free online session called How to Succeed with Property Investing, it's highly practical, data-backed session with Debbie, my wife, to show you how to establish your buying boundaries and maximize your borrowing capacity safely and evaluate the changing regional demand. There's absolutely no sales pressure, zero obligation, because our company does not sell property. We are 100% independent, licensed, financial advice company focusing entirely on your education strategy and your growth. You can find a registration link in our show notes below, or simply visit propertyapprentice.co.nz to secure your spot. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Hey there, want to stay on top of the latest property news and trends? Subscribe to the Property Apprentice podcast for weekly updates that will help you to navigate the market like a pro. We cover everything from insider tips to expert interviews, so you'll always be in the know. And don't forget to ring the bell and hit that subscribe button here on our YouTube channel for even more helpful content to boost your property journey. Check out the link in the description to subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode. Happy investing.